the tragic fate of Rome's 12 most feared emperors, explained in a few minutes. 1. Caligula. Caligula did not enter history only because he was cruel. He entered history because the most powerful office in the Roman world seemed to become an extension of his own paranoia. At first, Rome celebrated him. He was young, popular, connected to the family of Augustus, and many believed he would bring relief after the dark years of Tiberius. But that hope did not last. Ancient writers like Suetonius and Cassius Dio describe a ruler who humiliated senators, spent fortunes, threatened executions, and began to test how much fear the empire could endure. Some stories about him may have grown darker with time, because Roman historians loved turning hated emperors into monsters. But the important detail is that even if only part of the image is true, Rome itself came to believe that Caligula had become dangerous to everyone near him. The men closest to power understood something simple. If an emperor can destroy anyone without warning, then proximity to the palace is not protection. It is exposure. Caligula was assassinated by members of the Praetorian Guard in the year 41 AD. The man who wanted to be treated like a living god died in a corridor, cut down by the very system that was supposed to protect him. 2. Nero. Nero is remembered as one of the darkest names in Roman history. But what makes his story more disturbing is that he did not begin as the monster later generations imagined. He came to power as a teenager, surrounded by advisors, poets, philosophers, and men who believed they could control him. For a short time, his reign looked stable. Then the mask began to fall. Nero's government became tied to fear, luxury, performance, and blood. His own mother, Agrippina, had helped place him on the throne. Later, Nero had her killed. His first wife, Octavia, was exiled and executed. After the Great Fire of Rome, he became forever attached to the image of an emperor singing while the city burned, even though historians still debate the details. What matters is not only whether every accusation was literal. What matters is that Romans believed Nero could turn tragedy into theater. The deeper problem was that Nero seemed to treat the empire as a stage for himself. Senators feared him. Christians remembered his persecution. The army eventually turned against him. In the year 68 AD, rebellion spread, and Nero lost the support that made him emperor. He fled Rome and took his own life, reportedly crying that a great artist was dying in him. That was his final delusion. Rome did not mourn an artist. Rome escaped a ruler who had made himself unbearable. Now, before we continue, if you like understanding the darker side of history without wasting time, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps this kind of content reach more people. Let's move forward. 3. Domitian. Domitian was not the loudest monster Rome ever produced, and that is exactly what makes him dangerous. His reign was built less on chaos and more on control. He wanted order. He wanted discipline. He wanted obedience. But in Rome, the distance between order and terror could disappear very quickly. Ancient sources describe Domitian as suspicious, severe, and obsessed with the dignity of his position. He punished senators, monitored elite families, and created an atmosphere where people were afraid of speaking too freely. The Senate hated him so deeply that after his death, they tried to erase his memory from public honor. That alone tells us something. This was not just political disagreement. It was accumulated fear. The detail that makes Domitian's end so fitting is that he was killed inside the imperial residence. A conspiracy formed among palace officials, and even members of his own household were connected to it. In 96 AD, he was stabbed to death. The emperor who tried to control Rome through suspicion was destroyed by the one thing suspicion can never fully prevent: people whispering behind closed doors. 4. Commodus. Commodus inherited something most rulers would have killed for. He was the son of Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's most respected emperors. He did not need to conquer legitimacy. He was born into it. But that is what makes his fall so heavy. He received an empire with a powerful name behind him and slowly turned the throne into a spectacle. Commodus loved the arena. He presented himself as a gladiator, appeared in public games, and connected his image to Hercules. To the Roman people, games could be entertainment. To the Senate, an emperor playing gladiator was something more humiliating. It suggested that the man ruling the world wanted applause more than judgment. The empire was not only being governed, it was being performed. His cruelty and instability made the palace dangerous. People close to him began to fear what he might do next. According to the ancient accounts, a plot formed when those around him believed their own lives were at risk. Commodus was first poisoned, but when that failed, he was strangled by a wrestler named Narcissus in the year 192 AD. The emperor who loved the arena died not in a heroic contest, but in a private room, killed like a problem that had to be removed. 5. Caracalla. Caracalla's story is built on blood from the beginning. He ruled with his brother Geta after the death of their father, Septimius Severus. But Rome could not safely hold two brothers who hated each other. Their mother tried to mediate between them. The empire waited. The result was not reconciliation, it was murder. Caracalla had Geta killed in their mother's arms. After that, he ordered a purge of Geta's supporters. Thousands may have died in the political cleaning that followed. The message was clear. This was not a brother removing a rival in silence. This was an emperor teaching Rome that family, rank, and memory meant nothing if they stood in his way. But cruelty did not make him safe. Caracalla spent much of his reign with the army, trying to hold power through soldiers rather than love. The detail that exposes his weakness is that he was not killed in a grand battle or a Senate conspiracy. In 217 AD, during a campaign in the east, he was assassinated by a soldier while stopping beside the road. The emperor who murdered his brother to rule alone ended up dying far from Rome, killed by the kind of armed man he believed he controlled. 6. Elagabalus. Elagabalus became emperor as a teenager, and Rome never fully knew what to do with him. He came from the eastern provinces and brought with him the worship of a Syrian sun god. That alone would have made the Roman elite uncomfortable. But the problem was not only religion. It was the feeling that the center of Roman power had been turned upside down. Ancient writers describe a reign filled with scandal, strange ceremonies, sexual rumors, religious provocation, and contempt for Roman tradition. Some of these stories were probably exaggerated by enemies who wanted him remembered as unnatural. But even allowing for propaganda, the political reality is clear. Elagabalus alienated the army, the Senate, and the people who had made him emperor. His own grandmother, Julia Maesa, eventually shifted support to another young relative, Severus Alexander. That detail matters. In Roman politics, when your own family starts preparing a replacement, the end is already near. In 222 AD, Elagabalus was murdered by the Praetorian Guard, along with his mother. His body was dragged through the streets and thrown into the Tiber. Rome did not just kill him, it tried to spit him out. 7. Maximinus Thrax. Maximinus Thrax was feared for a different reason. He was not a palace emperor raised in luxury. He was a soldier emperor, a giant figure from the frontier who rose through military strength. To some, that made him impressive. To others, it made him terrifying. Rome had always admired soldiers, but it feared being ruled by one who seemed to understand only force. His reign came during the crisis of the 3rd century, when emperors rose and fell with frightening speed. Maximinus increased pressure on the wealthy, relied heavily on the army, and became hated by the Senate. The empire was no longer a stable machine. It was a wounded animal, and every ambitious military man seemed capable of grabbing the purple. The detail that makes his fate brutal is that his own soldiers ended it. During the siege of Aquileia in 238 AD, his army suffered hunger, frustration, and exhaustion. The men who had followed him decided he was no longer worth following. They killed Maximinus and his son, cut off their heads, and sent them away as proof. The emperor who rose by the army died because the army grew tired of him. 8. Aurelian. Aurelian was not feared because he was useless. He was feared because he was effective. He restored large parts of a broken empire, defeated enemies, recovered lost territories, and earned the title Restorer of the World. But military greatness can create its own danger. A ruler who saves the state may also become a man everyone is afraid to disappoint. Aurelian was strict. He demanded discipline. He punished corruption. To soldiers and officials who were used to softer habits, that severity could feel deadly. According to the tradition, a secretary feared punishment and forged a list of names, making certain officers believe the emperor planned to execute them. Whether every detail is exact or not, the shape of the story reveals the atmosphere around him. Fear had become believable. In 275 AD, Aurelian was assassinated by his own officers while preparing a campaign. The tragedy is that he may not have been killed for actual cruelty, but for the fear that cruelty was coming. That is one of the darkest lessons of power. Once people believe you might destroy them, the truth may arrive too late to save you. 9. Diocletian. Diocletian was one of the most important emperors Rome ever had. He reorganized the empire, divided authority, strengthened administration, and tried to make imperial power less fragile. But he was also feared for the scale of control he brought to Roman life. Under him, the emperor became more distant, more ceremonial, almost untouchable. The darkest part of his memory comes from the great persecution of Christians. Edicts ordered churches destroyed, scriptures burned, and believers pressured to sacrifice to the traditional gods. For Christians, Diocletian became a symbol of imperial violence against faith. But the political logic was broader. He believed unity required obedience, and obedience required pressure. His fate was unusual. Diocletian did not die by assassination like so many others. He abdicated and retired, but that does not make the ending peaceful. After leaving power, he watched the system he built begin to crack under the ambitions of other men. He died away from the throne, while the empire moved toward new civil wars. The emperor who tried to make Rome orderly enough to survive discovered that even the strongest design can collapse when human ambition enters the room. 10. Galerius. Galerius is often remembered as one of the harshest figures behind the persecution of Christians. He rose under Diocletian's system and became one of the men responsible for enforcing imperial unity. To him, Christianity was not simply a private belief. It looked like disobedience inside the body of the empire. The persecution associated with his era was severe. Churches were attacked. Sacred texts were burned. Christians were imprisoned, tortured, or pressured to renounce their faith. What makes Galerius especially striking is the reversal at the end. Near death, suffering from a terrible illness described in horrifying terms by Christian writers, he issued an edict of toleration in 311 AD. That final act did not erase what came before. It made the ending heavier. A ruler who had helped crush a faith finally admitted that the empire had failed to destroy it. He died soon after. To Christian memory, his body became almost a symbol of judgment. To history, his story shows something colder. Rome could break people, burn books, and threaten communities, but even imperial terror had limits. 11. Valentinian I. Valentinian I was a hard military emperor. He defended the frontiers, punished corruption, and ruled with a temper that frightened those around him. In a collapsing world, harshness could look like strength, but the same force that made him effective also made his court dangerous. Ancient accounts describe him as explosive, severe, and capable of terrifying anger. He did not rule in the elegant world of Augustus. He ruled in an empire under pressure, with enemies across the borders and anxiety inside the state. Every frontier problem felt like a threat to survival. Every mistake looked like betrayal. His end came in a way that almost feels written as a warning. In 375 AD, while meeting envoys from the Quadi, Valentinian became so enraged that he suffered a fatal medical collapse, often described as a burst blood vessel or stroke. He was not murdered by an assassin. He was destroyed in the middle of his own fury. The emperor who used anger as a weapon was finally consumed by it. 12. Honorius. Honorius was feared in a different way, not because he was personally terrifying like Caligula or Nero, but because under him the Western Empire became terrifyingly weak. Sometimes the most dangerous ruler is not the one who kills everyone around him. Sometimes it is the one who sits on the throne while the world falls apart. Honorius ruled while Rome faced disasters that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. In 410 AD, the city of Rome was sacked by the Visigoths under Alaric. This was not just a military defeat. It was a psychological earthquake. The city that had ruled the world was entered and plundered by outsiders. The detail that makes Honorius so haunting is not a dramatic assassination. It is survival without greatness. He continued to reign after the sack, protected in Ravenna, while the old image of Roman invincibility died. He passed away in 423 AD, but the damage outlived him. His fate was not a bloody corridor or a dagger in the dark. His punishment was to be remembered as the emperor who lived while Rome's myth broke. 12 emperors, 12 different endings. Some were murdered by guards. Some were abandoned by armies. Some died in sickness, fear, exile, or humiliation. But the pattern is hard to miss. In Rome, power did not make a man safe. It made every weakness larger. Paranoia became policy. Cruelty became memory. Fear became a circle that returned to the throne. And that is why these emperors still disturb history. They were not just rulers who made mistakes. They were men who showed what happens when an empire gives one person almost everything, and then waits to see what part of him grows first. If this video helped you understand the darker side of Rome, share it with someone who would find it interesting, leave a like, and subscribe for more stories from the past. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.